Mic check. Mic check. Testing, testing. This is not a test. This is real. So it seems a lot of people are, trying to be the superhero. And we got our times all mixed up, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, how can they be the super here if they don't even know when here is, you know? And it's like, they don't know. They don't know. But I know. Where it's like, the future really is just now, you know? The obstacles, the challenges, whether or not you meet them to become something of the future is present, you know? And it's like, really, all you're doing is just simple competition. You can just collapse the whole dilemma into a present one, in which there are none of these far-seeing players to mess things up. Because all that's really going on, even from their whole perspective, where, something is actually coming from the future. Well, it's like, how does the future actually change the past? They're fighting history. They're fighting a story. Now, how well the story actually is preserved is up to what? The ones who wrote the story, right? So, as these factions in the future combat the narratives, they test the will of the narratives that were. But truly, when is the will tested for the narratives that will be, but while they are actually being made? That being said, truly, you could simply state that really you could collapse the whole paradigm into one of which really is just competition and perspective of the world and people's opinions and cultures that are vying for the right or ability to create their own spaces and to do whatever, which is just literally just a business model that's going down. It's just trying to tangle things up as much as possible so that it's like, you can't see through the mess. But, yeah. So, if you're looking at the past and you're trying to, I guess, fight the past, ironically enough, the more you look into it, the more that the story kind of unfolds, you know? It's like, your vision definitely is what can determine as to whether or not you can ultimately get through the past. It's like you're getting a shovel out and you're just digging. Now you're going to hit these rocks, right? Which may be books, but depending on how you look at them, their sound, their images will stop your digression, which is really just a derivation into what was. And as you yourself try to become what was by being something that the future beholds, you're going to come across things. Now, here's the really amazing part of this whole venture, where you're going to come across a lot as you're digging down, you take your shovel out. Ultimately, though, to keep going and to dig down as deep as you can be, you're going to be building upon principles which are principles of the structure of reality. And so eventually, you're going to ultimately just come across and connect with these ideals. And that's like the internal core of all that is, type of thing. And then it's just like, why are you fighting that? Because if you're trying to dig down, like, you're using that. It's like, just the center of this whole thing is built upon the functions to be able to get there, right? And so, if that is your main goal, then everything else will just be like kind of something that is easily moved aside out of your way. Because you're built upon something else. And then ultimately, if these are the things that you're built upon, then you're not truly going to be fighting against the principles that, actually hold them together, as you understand the principles themselves and the parts that they play, kind of almost as the tools in your hands which led you to be able to get down to where you were, or where you are now. And, I think a lot of people get lost in time, but ultimately, really, once you dig down deep enough like that, you find out that what would be changed in any time. And if you were to try and build some place where people could travel through time, how would you go about doing that? Well, it all has to do with, again, this structure and explanation, which allows people to fit these pieces within their paradigm and reality without collapsing their own perspective, or without them actually kind of going as deep so that they can be light, and not having to understand the intricacies. They're just getting on an airplane and going over here to there. And who knows? This place that they're in is like some cyber city of the future, but to them it's just like, oh, this is just a different city from the one that I am from, that is composed of different things, and the people here are motivated by different goals. And obviously, as it is a different city from the one I come from, the people in the city that I come from, obviously, we choose to do things this way. It doesn't necessarily have to be where it's like, the future is all this one way, or any time, which is just a place, is just this one way. But, ultimately, people are just kind of getting on this plane and going there, and, they step off and they're just like, oh, I'm just in another place, yada, 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 Doesn't even have to be like this thing where they're, just, like, stepping into the, whoever knows, whatever future, right? And it's just like, for the ones that are like the carriers between all these places, to them, the time really doesn't matter. They're just beholding the structure. And it's just like, oh, well, this is just the structure of it, and it doesn't really matter what the time is, because the structure is truly the thing which is indispensable in any time. And so you're just able to just go wherever. You just sit there and just behold everything, and then, it's just like, as you're dealing with all that, then, anything which is kind of like just those little rocks, due to how much leverage, like that place that we spoke of earlier, where you beheld, like the internal structure of everything, they're just like little rocks that you can just use your leverage to just push over, like a boulder, or whatever else have you, And so you're just able to just go between all these different places and times and whatever else. And really, people don't realize it, but they're just stepping in the vehicle and just going over here, going over there. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm in a different house. Oh yeah, I'm in a different city. Oh yeah, I'm in a different state. Oh yeah, I'm in a different country. Blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? And it's like all these different levels of all that. From like different types of geography and terrain and everything that goes into that. Right? And then, if people want to become a part of the place that they are in and form a relationship with it, then, there's going to be this whole thing of placement which occurs, right? And whether or not they have a part to play. I mean, obviously they somewhat do, because they made it there in the first place. Now it's just a matter of how long do they last in such a place, which is obviously a whole interconnected play between where they come from and where they are going, or whatever else is there. And, what this place thinks it is, and how much of this new thing, which wishes to be more a part of it, does it itself think should be a part of it, or how much does it identify with it, right? And what parts of the story that this thing is carrying in its tail that came to this new location does this thing not want within its location? Does it have to cut out certain parts for this other place to grow to what it thinks it wants to grow into? And then again, you're fighting that whole future thing, and then it's just a business competition model that just takes place when you are in traveling anywhere. But then, you have to take in business ethics. But then to look at this from like a hyperdimensional level, business ethics is really just like, almost like colonization. And then you have to look at like cultures, and you have to look at like all these other things and aspects of people, places, geography, terrain, wants, wills, desires versus needs. And ultimately, have you just become bored with where you're coming from, and so you're just looking for something new? But how much of where you go will you change to be where you came from? And in so doing, you never really left where you left from, because you're transforming the new place into the same place. Right? And so, you got to take in all these cultural things into play here, and all these policies, and all these forms of diplomacy. But then, you know what I mean? There's lots of different factors, right? Where it's like, maybe people want fire, Do you have the right to deny them fire if you brought over a cow? They want cattle, but you like the place because it's pristine and doesn't have animals that are, meant to be fenced in and housed. So what happens if the place does become modernized? Then is it the place that you like to go to? But do you have the right to tell them not to have these things? You know? It's like, do you have the right to tell the future what to be? Do you have the right to tell the past what to be? Do you have the right to go dig up land and see what the past was? To try and find your place in the past? Or in the future? Or even demanding in the present? You know, and then there's a lot of places that you try and go there. They want you for some reason, and whatever else. It's like a lot of little children, a lot of little babies. It's like they don't know. They really don't know. And so they think that they can sanitize, which they don't understand. They don't understand. And, all it is just a way to fit you through really just, a cutting up of things. It's all just a cutting up of things. It's just a rehearsed motion. So that you become mesmerized and you forget. Because the radiation is this adrenaline for those adrenaline junkies, right? Who are voyagers out on the ocean, but they haven't taken enough citrus, and they're like a bunch of wild monkeys swinging from all these trees, But people are trying to civilize, and they're trying to put ropes around these trees and pull them down and build homes and houses. And then ultimately, the monkeys are seen as something that needs to go. And so, you got to sanitize. You got to sanitize the radical nature of these things, because they don't have enough citrus. But, that's what it's like in the wild, But really, when are we not in the wild? When can things feel like they can sit trustingly in a position without having to move? Who are the ones that are able to do this? Is it the predators, because they fear none? And the ones who have to run around doing all the labor, they can't stop. They can't take a seat. Because if not, they'll be whipped into shape by those that feed off the blood and sweat that they soak up as they tell all these people to go around and do all this work.